It seems like we've reached code red in the markets and across the entire tech industry as money appears to be drying up while competition keeps intensifying. And what just happened with OpenAI and Google reveals everything you need to understand about why this bubble might be popping. Reports emerged last week that Google's new chatbot called Gemini 3 comes out to be pretty good and may even be better than ChatGPT, which is genuinely worrisome for OpenAI because here's what most people don't realize. They are not profitable, they're just burning massive amounts of cash, and you've got a giant player like Google coming in loaded with money, coders, and engineers who've been in this game a long time. But here's what makes this situation potentially catastrophic for the entire AI bubble. OpenAI and ChatGPT represent a direct challenge to Google's core business. They've even released browsers recently, which is another challenge to Google, and you really think Google's going to sit around and say, okay, fine, you can just take away our search engine business? No, of course they're going to fight back with everything they have. Once you understand why this is going to be essentially a spending war and OpenAI may be running out of cash because they constantly have to keep raising money, why Michael Burry just revived his short bet against Tesla, calling the stock ridiculously overvalued, while pointing out that Elon Musk was all in on electric cars until competition showed up, then all in on autonomous driving until competition showed up, and now all in on robots until competition inevitably shows up, and what it means that Gen Z shoppers are cutting their holiday spending dramatically from around $12,300 last year down to $7,800 this year, while the crypto bubble appears to be popping with some retail traders losing 80% in leveraged MicroStrategy ETFs. You'll realize we're watching multiple bubbles deflate simultaneously, and the economic system these tech billionaires want, where AI and robots replace everyone, creates a fundamental contradiction, because if we're all replaced, how are we supposed to buy their products? It seems like we've reached code red in the markets and across the entire technology industry as money appears to be drying up while competition keeps getting stronger and stronger. Reports emerged that OpenAI's Sam Altman has declared code red internally to improve ChatGPT as Google threatens their AI lead. Basically, what happened is last week Google released this new chatbot system called Gemini 3, and it turns out to be pretty good and may even be better than ChatGPT based on multiple reports and industry analysis. That's genuinely worrisome for OpenAI because here's what most people don't understand about their business model. They are not profitable. They're just burning massive amounts of cash continuously. And now you've got a giant player like Google coming into the space aggressively, and Google's loaded with resources. They've got money, they've got world-class coders, they've got engineers, they've been in this technology game for a very long time. OpenAI and ChatGPT represent a direct challenge to Google's core business. OpenAI and a couple of these AI companies have also released browsers recently, which is another direct challenge to Google's dominance. Do you really think Google's going to sit around and say, okay, fine, you can just take away our search engine business. We don't need search engines or anything like that. We'll just let everyone use your chatbot. No, of course they're going to fight back aggressively. Of course they're going to fight back with everything they have. This is going to be essentially a spending war between massive corporations. And from OpenAI's perspective, they may be running out of cash because they constantly have to keep raising money. They're perpetually in fundraising mode. On top of that AI competition situation, and this is why it's code red across multiple fronts, you've got a big short bet against Tesla. Michael Burry, the famous investor from the financial crisis, has revived his short bet against Tesla, calling the stock ridiculously overvalued. And of course, it is ridiculously overvalued. This is something that gets discussed constantly. Sometimes people ask, why does the Tesla stock keep going up if it's so overvalued? Markets can be irrational for extended periods. It happens regularly. It's hard to time the exact top. It's hard to time the exact bottom. Markets can act crazy sometimes. But when you see multiple patterns happening simultaneously, it really feels like we're reaching a top. Listen to what Michael Burry says about Tesla and think about what it means for OpenAI, because the situations are remarkably similar. He says the Elon Musk cult was all in on electric cars until competition showed up. Then they were all in on autonomous driving until competition showed up. And now they're all in on robots until, you guessed it, competition inevitably shows up. That's pretty similar to ChatGPT's situation. They were the only game in town initially. People said that was their opportunity, their window, but you start to get more and more players entering the game. The Tesla situation is genuinely problematic because basically Elon Musk may be a first mover in some industries, sometimes not even first mover, sometimes he's spending aggressively trying to catch up. For example, Elon has his own chatbot system, but it's way down compared to the other major players. That's his Grok system. Regarding electric cars, there's substantial competition emerging. There are Korean models that you probably don't see much in the United States, but they're slowly going to be entering that market because they're available in other regions and they're different alternatives. Then you have the Chinese brands, which are doing very well overseas, particularly BYD has been a significant hit globally. There's just a lot of competition emerging. For autonomous vehicles, if Elon wants to pursue the robotaxi concept, the leader in the United States appears to be Waymo, not Tesla at all. And regarding humanoid robots, clearly Boston Dynamics is a leader in America. And then you've got numerous companies in China that will probably come in at cheaper price points because they're able to manufacture at lower costs. Obviously, there's always a balance between cost and quality, but what if Chinese manufacturers can achieve both simultaneously? And don't underestimate Korea either. Hyundai actually acquired Boston Dynamics, so there's a joint partnership situation there. Tesla's in a difficult competitive position, and their CEO is frankly behaving erratically. Without getting too personal, Elon Musk didn't look particularly healthy in his recent interviews, and he's gained a considerable amount of weight, which for the wealthiest person in the world is somewhat concerning. Michael Burry can apparently smell the problems at Tesla. He's calling it out publicly, and he's putting his money where his analysis is. There's another fascinating detail about Tesla's shareholder situation. Burry said Tesla dilutes its shareholders at an estimated rate of 3.6% per year through stock-based compensation. It awards employees without share buybacks to offset the impact, and Elon Musk's gargantuan compensation package would make matters significantly worse. Basically, if you're a shareholder in Tesla, the way they structure stock compensation for employees and the way they structured Musk's pay package essentially works against your interests. The company doesn't really have much new product coming out, if anything, and they're already falling behind the competition. Tesla's basically become a stock promotion company at this point rather than primarily an innovation company. Then you also have the crypto situation developing. The crypto bubble appears to be popping. Some people have lost really substantial amounts. Crypto retail traders have been hit hard as leveraged MicroStrategy ETFs plunged 80%. What happened is people were using leveraged funds, these tickers like MSTX, MSTU, MSTP, whatever these various tickers are. They've dropped 80% from their highs. Then you had Michael Saylor with his company strategy where he put massive amounts of money into Bitcoin. That's down 60% from the high. Every day you still see some people in complete denial saying crypto is going to be the future. But there's a fundamental problem, whether it's crypto mining operations that figures like Eric Trump promote or data centers for AI. All of this requires enormous amounts of electrical power. Where are you going to get that power? You have to keep building massive data centers to keep up with all the computational demand. We're eventually going to run out of available capital, which connects to the consumer spending situation. The consumer is basically strapped for cash. There was an interesting story about how Gen Z shoppers aren't spending like retail companies need them to. Basically, retailers need consumers to subscribe to all their AI services, and they need people to buy Tesla vehicles or whatever products they're selling. But young people especially are saying they simply don't have any money, and they're cutting back dramatically. There's data on average expected holiday spending by generation comparing last year to this year. This matters enormously because if you're OpenAI, if you're Google, if you're Tesla, you have to convince people to buy your products and services. People who may want to buy your stuff may not necessarily have enough financial resources to actually purchase it. People have limited resources. The other thing that's absurd about this whole economic system that people like Elon Musk or Sam Altman apparently want is they want AI and robots to replace all human workers. But if we're all replaced by automation, how are we going to buy their products? That's a fundamental contradiction in their vision. Already, though, among most generations, people are cutting back spending. Gen Z in particular looks like they're cutting back the most dramatically. Last year, average Gen Z holiday spending was around $12,300. This year, it's closer to $7,800. That's a massive reduction. Millennials appear to be the biggest holiday spenders. Last year, they they spent over $2,000, now it's like $1,700. Gen X is roughly similar with slight increases. Baby boomers spent around $1,600 last year, this year around $1,400. When you examine this data and combine it with other economic indicators, there are contradictions. MasterCard came out saying consumer spending is up, but that doesn't quite align with the survey data. We have what economists call a K-shaped economy, where the wealthy are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. The top 10% or even top 2% make up a much larger portion of total sales than in the past. When you look at aggregated sales data, this very small group of wealthy consumers covers up what everyone else is experiencing economically. There's even specific data showing people bought fewer items. Overall, American consumers turned out for Black Friday. U.S. sales on Black Friday hit $18 billion, up 3% compared to a year earlier. That's largely just inflation. But U.S. shoppers purchased 2% fewer items at checkout. With average prices up 7%, shoppers made 1% fewer online orders. There's also survey data on the share of people saying their household financial situation is worse than last year. Basically, Gen Z is saying things are worse than last year. That's actually true across most generations. Boomers are saying conditions are roughly the same. While all these technology companies are trying to get you to buy their products, they're also shuffling staff around internally. For example, Apple recently named a former Microsoft and Google executive to succeed their retiring AI chief. Companies like Apple have to come out with compelling reasons why consumers should buy the new phone. Their new marketing is probably going to emphasize it's got AI inside, it's AI capable, AI ready. But are people going to buy these devices in huge numbers? Are you willing to pay an extra 10 to 20% for AI features when people are financially strapped? Maybe not. Personally, there's no urgent need to buy the latest and greatest technology. For example, the VR goggle products. That's not something many people want to wear. Not something most want to spend $2,000 on. Many companies are producing this technology, but when you talk to people about it, those who have it might say they like it, but there simply aren't that many people who own this expensive technology. For that technology to become attractive to mass markets, the price really needs to come down substantially. In the AI situation, phones are already around $1,000 these days. Do consumers want to add another 20% to an already expensive phone price to get AI features? Probably not for most people. The phone many people already have works perfectly fine. Most consumers try to hold out as long as possible before purchasing another expensive phone. That's the economic reality. There was something somewhat amusing from the White House. They retweeted someone, possibly the housing secretary, saying that in October, over 26% of all U.S. home listings offered buyers a price cut averaging $25,000. The way they spin this is that it's bringing affordability back to the housing market. There are different ways to interpret that data. For some people, you could say foreclosures are increasing, people are forced to sell because they can't make their mortgage payments. Prices are coming down, but that's not necessarily positive economic news. Or you could interpret it as people want to sell their house for a certain amount, but there are no buyers, so they have to lower prices. That's affordability from one perspective. Housing prices in almost any country are simply too expensive. When you examine the median income compared to the median house price, the ratio is reaching very high levels in the United States compared to historical norms. It's expensive. Everyone knows this reality. When you factor in insurance costs and HOA fees, maybe renting becomes more economically rational for many people. They'll spin declining prices as positive, but if you're trying to sell and you owe money on the house and don't want to be underwater financially, price cuts aren't positive for you as a seller. Looking at the broader political and economic situation, there are concerning statements coming from political figures that reveal where policy might be heading. These inflammatory statements about travel bans and immigration are economically counterproductive. You're killing tourism, you're killing immigration, you're killing foreign investment flowing into the country. People and businesses simply don't want to engage with the United States when this is the rhetoric coming from leadership. There are proposals to end dual citizenship. The likely reason they want this is probably to ensure all tax revenue goes to the United States. But there are countless situations where people legitimately want more than one citizenship. Essentially, what these policies accomplish is pushing away capital and talent. In Japan, for example, they're considering raising interest rates. Essentially, what's developing is that many Japanese investors and investors from other countries may start investing more domestically, buying their own country's bonds rather than purchasing U.S. treasuries. That's a real problem for the United States because America relies heavily on foreign countries to buy U.S. debt. If political leadership is antagonizing everyone internationally, that's real economic leverage that other countries have over the United States. They don't like to acknowledge it publicly, but it's absolutely a real factor. In Europe, inflation went up recently. Energy costs are extremely high in Europe. They're high everywhere, actually. The main problem, and there are so many interconnected problems, is that for these technology billionaires and figures like Elon Musk, their entire solution is building more data centers to replace human workers, more robots, more AI, and just driving that wealth gap between rich and poor even further. It's completely economically unsustainable. You're not alone if you get frustrated with how the economic system is structured. A lot of these wealthy people at the top have substantial resources, but it's all fundamentally based on debt. It's all based on broken promises, and they're going to be exposed quite quickly when there's no more money available to borrow. Theoretically, they could print enormous amounts of money. That might be the actual plan, depending on who gets appointed to key positions. We're poised for a genuine economic meltdown. That's why Michael Burry is making short bets against specific companies. He's bet against 3 major companies. Would he bet against another? Probably wouldn't take a position against Apple or Google. That's quite risky. But Tesla, Nvidia, Palantir, those are the types of positions he's taking because you could include Apple and Google and Microsoft in the big tech sphere, but suggesting something like Google is just going to disappear doesn't make sense. If Tesla disappeared, our lives wouldn't change dramatically. But Google's a major company. Same with Apple and Microsoft. Those are genuinely strong companies with real products and services. But there are many other companies that could disappear and you honestly wouldn't notice much. If OpenAI disappeared tomorrow, it wouldn't really change most people's lives substantially. But those other major technology companies, lots of people are employed there, consumers use their products daily. Not everything's going to disappear or go bankrupt, but some companies will fail. That's what gets hurt most in any bubble. Those peripheral companies that don't have sustainable business models. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.